In October of 1995, I was living in Chicago, fresh out of college, and sharing a dingy one-bedroom unit with my cousin Andrea in an old building off North Sheridan Road. It was a red brick pre-war apartment complex with creaking radiators and elevators that made more noise than motion. Our unit was on the 4th floor, room 403, facing the back alley of a corner pharmacy and an abandoned lot that used to be a gas station but had been fenced off since the late 80s. A row of dying trees lined the edge of the property, always whispering with the Lake Michigan wind. I had just started my job at a local bookstore in Edgewater, and Andrea was waitressing at a 24-hour diner on Clark Street. We were two broke 20-somethings with a taste for the strange. Halloween was coming, and with no money for parties or bars, we decided to hold a séance using a Ouija board. We'd found an old one at a second-hand shop on Granville Avenue. It was wooden, not cardboard like the modern ones, with carved letters instead of printed ones, and a planchette that looked handmade. There were tiny scratches in the wood, almost like fingernail marks, and the surface had a faint scorch mark near the Z. The night we decided to use it was one of those cold, windy October nights where the lake air slithers under the windowsills and presses its cold lips to your skin. We turned off the overhead lights and lit a circle of tea candles around the board, then placed it in the centre of our living room floor. The walls were painted a strange pale green, and the plaster was cracking in the corners. The old wood floors moaned even when no one was walking on them. We sat down cross-legged, each with a finger lightly resting on the planchette. We didn't say any rituals or chants. I think we were too naive or too skeptical to think it necessary. We just asked out loud if there was anyone with us. We waited. 5 minutes passed. The candles flickered, but that wasn't unusual. There was a slight draft from the single-pane windows. The planchette didn't move. Nothing happened. But then something did. The radiator in the bedroom, which hadn't been turned on yet that season, let out a long, hissing sigh. It sounded like someone drawing in breath. That's the best way I can describe it. A low, rattling inhale. Both of us turned to look toward the hallway, expecting to see something, someone standing there. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, but beyond that, there was only dark. When we looked back down at the board, the planchette had shifted. Just barely. It was no longer in the centre of the board, but over the H. We didn't speak, just placed our fingers back on it. Neither of us pushed. At least, I didn't. It began to move again, slowly, gliding across the board with a resistance that felt like dragging a spoon through syrup. It spelled out H-E-R-E. Then it stopped. The air in the room felt thicker. Andrea's breath was visible, even though the heat was technically on. I remember feeling a tightness in my chest, like my body wanted me to get up, leave, move, do something. But I was frozen in place. We asked another question. We didn't speak it out loud this time. I didn't need to. The board answered anyway. The planchette moved faster this time. W-I-N-D-O-W. We turned slowly to face the living room window. It was locked shut. The glass was fogged with condensation, but on the inside, and there, drawn through the moisture, were 4 long, vertical streaks, not finger width, wider. The candles went out, all of them, at once. The silence that followed was total. No traffic sounds, no voices from the hallway, not even the whisper of wind through the warped glass. It was like the world had been vacuum sealed. I remember standing up slowly, not daring to break the silence. My ears were ringing. I didn't feel cold anymore. I didn't feel anything. Andrea stood too, and I noticed her skin had gone pale, the kind of pale that looks blue around the mouth. We didn't clean up the board. We didn't even touch it. We went into the bedroom together and closed the door, locked it, even though we both knew how useless that was. But the night wasn't done with us. Around 2:30 in the morning, I woke up, unsure why. My eyes opened on their own, and I was instantly aware of two things. One, I couldn't hear Andrea breathing in the bed beside mine. And two, something was standing in the hallway beyond the open bedroom door. It was a tall figure, not a shadow, because it was darker than the shadowed hallway behind it. The way it stood wasn't right. It was too still, too stiff, like it was holding its breath and waiting for me to see it. Its head was slightly tilted, like it was curious. I blinked and it was gone. That's when the sound started. Not footsteps, tapping. Gentle, precise tapping, as if nails, long nails, were being drawn slowly across the hallway wall. Then the bedroom doorknob rattled once sharply before falling silent again. Andrea hadn't moved. I remember watching her chest and realizing she wasn't breathing, or at least I couldn't see it. I tried to wake her, but my limbs felt numb. I was struggling to move, trapped in that thin space between waking and sleep paralysis. I couldn't scream. I couldn't cry. All I could do was lie there, heartbeat punching my ribcage, while something invisible pressed on the walls of the room like a swelling tide. Eventually, I passed out. That's the only way I can describe it. I didn't fall asleep. I blacked out. In the morning, the apartment looked normal. Too normal. The candles were still snuffed. The planchette had been placed neatly in the centre of the board. Neither of us remembered doing that. We hadn't even spoken a word since lighting the candles the night before. Andrea didn't want to talk about it. She said it had just been a game, a prank maybe. She even accused me of setting it all up, the window, the board, the tapping. But I knew she didn't believe her own words. Her hands shook while she cleaned up the board and shoved it into the back of the hall closet. But things didn't go back to normal. That week, every night at exactly 3:03 a.m., I woke up to the sound of breathing. Not mine, not Andrea's. This was heavy, deliberate, slow. It always seemed to come from just outside the window, though we lived 4 stories up with no fire escape. On the 7th night, I stood and stared out the glass, hoping to catch someone, anyone. All I saw was the alley and the dead trees swaying. But the breathing was louder than ever. It fogged the inside of the window. Again, 4 streaks appeared. Andrea started sleepwalking. She'd stand in front of the closet door where the board was kept and just wait. One night I caught her whispering, but her lips weren't moving. The whispering was coming from behind the door. I should have thrown it away. I thought about it, but every time I tried to grab the board, something in my body screamed, "Don't," like it was physically dangerous to touch it now. Andrea didn't even look at that closet anymore. A month later, she moved out, didn't give a reason, just said she needed to reset. I stayed, partly because I couldn't afford rent alone anywhere else, and partly because I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been left unfinished. The Ouija board stayed in the closet for 3 more months. Sometimes I heard scratching from inside. Sometimes the breathing returned. Sometimes I caught my reflection in the window moving slightly out of sync. I finally got rid of the board on New Year's Eve. I wrapped it in 3 garbage bags and left it in a dumpster 2 neighbourhoods over. The next morning, the closet smelled faintly of burnt wood. I never touched another Ouija board, never went near that second-hand store again, and I never told anyone what really happened in room 403, until now. But I still wake up at 3:03, and sometimes, when the wind hits the window just right, I hear my name whispered, not shouted, not spoken, just breathed from somewhere on the other side of the glass. And I remember, no one ever called me by my full name, no one alive anyway.